Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reviews where today we're going to be checking out a track by an act named Sodia titled Man of Many Faces. And if we switch over to here we have ourselves a track on Music B. This is also available on most social digital streaming platforms should I say, so if you want to check out more of their stuff. So without further ado we're going to listen through this track from start till finish and we're going to hear what we think. Let's go! It's nice and loud. Low tune guitars. Definitive Alice in Chains, early 90s grunge. I think that this part would have worked a little bit better if the guitars had been double tracked on the sides. It was really cool. I liked the interesting, the combination of various instrumental layers, how tight they were in regards to the post-production with the dynamic range and everything like that. And I think that it was interesting the way the vocals sounded in that mix, but here I'm just wondering if it would have been better to have had the vocals on the side, or the guitar on the sides there, should I say. Because it kind of sounds like it's arguing with the vocals in the center of the stereo field. It's an incredibly sinister distorted tone on the guitar though with this lead line. Tight and claustrophobic. It's so grungy. It's like they listened to a lot of the musicians in the 90s era, like Nirvana, Alice in Chains, bands like that. And they took the various assets and elements of each track act that they liked, like with the fourth vocal harmonies, the intervals used there, as well as just the filthy distortion on the guitars. That's so slow as well. That the drums are tight, and I love the phrasing there. The minimalism almost sounds like the track is kind of stumbling through the dark. It's a really interesting environment coupled with the bass tone. I like the fact that we're not going back to another verse here. What I would have liked there is for there to have been a little bit of notch EQing with that filtered radio voice or what was going on there in that section. There were some sharp resonances in the upper register that I think could have been lowered a little bit with some notch EQing there with a low Q on it. Aside from that, it was a really cool change of pace, you know. It's ferocious. It's kind of nice to completely disassociate from the key signature and have a solo phrasing with that shape like that. Yeah, great use of space. It's nice to have that extra layer of vocals, you know, as a change from previous hooks, but it's just hard to hear them clearly with so much going on in the center of the stereo field, you know? I mean, it's such a rough and ruthless tone to all the instruments within this mix. I don't think this is a track that'll be for everybody, but for those that are into music similar to this and sort of comparative genres, comparable genres, I think that, yeah, for sure. Oh, classy fade out. Good. Good. Well done. Welcome to my review, the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named Sodia, titled Man of Many Faces. Now, what do I think this track was about? My best guess at what this is about is a person who is difficult to read. Maybe they have split personalities, or they're struggling to really figure out what their purpose is or what their role, what they serve. And maybe their inability to be able to read this person is what's going to cause everything to turn to black. Maybe the fact that they cannot be honest when they look in the mirror, or maybe the glass is shattered. Maybe the fact that they cannot tell what's real and what's not is the cause for things to kind of end like that. I would want a few more listens to this track to really ascertain what's going on within it. So that's my best shot at understanding what the track is about on a first listen basis. Obviously, if you're curious about the lyrics or you interpret it differently, first of all, let me know in the comments. But two, also, feel free to, have more of a listen to it just to kind of consolidate that through their various, digital streaming platforms. I'll mention that in the description of this video. But basically, I think that's what the track is about. The vocal performance was interesting. We had engaging, notably appropriate vocal styles for the genre. It was that there was some parts where it droned a little bit, but in a way which was, again, like it was part of the genre. Like there was a sense of, it wasn't necessarily apathy, almost melancholy to some parts there with the way it was delivered in regards to the tone. But different types of personalities poke through it turns to black, but there was clarity to those lines there, and some higher range overdubs in the last chorus there. It was good. It was solid. I think that the vocal style suited the dreary kind of claustrophobic nature of the tune. And I don't mean that as a negative thing. What we've got to understand is that music doesn't need to be happy and positive, fun time all the time. It would be very boring if that was the case. Music can come in a lot of shapes and sizes, and I think there's just as much as reason for music like this to exist, where it may not be a totally pleasant experience, because that's what life is like sometimes, and people go through this stuff. And I think that in regards to the way the instruments were played, when I put that with what was going on with the style of vocals in the story, that does make sense to me, the connection there. But we had interesting vocal melodies and some harmonies going on there with those fourth intervals. I think they were between the bits. It was great to have the stuff going on with the variation with the way we approached the verse and chorus parts. We didn't just stick with one idea or concept. We overdubbed them and layered them with less and more to change the intensities in between bits. And I like the fact that we also took away the vocals sometimes just to be able to appreciate those those sizzly guitar lines, or the bass or the drum parts where they just kind of trotted on, they just kind of stumbled forward into the ether and the darkness. Did all the words come through clearly? No, if I'm honest, not all the words came through clearly, but I think part of it was the style of delivery we were going for. We didn't have clear pronunciation of some of the syllables, which would have helped us to be able to hear those words clearly. And I think if we'd had more focus on that, it would have been a little bit too kind of prompt and proper, if that makes sense, for it to really kind of gel with the rest of the ingredients in the arrangement. I think there was a great connection in general with what the singer was doing, and how that came together with the lyrics. So they were effective by virtue of that alone, if nothing else. But I think also what made the song was obviously the rest of everything else that was going on with the guitar, bass, and drums. And this is a near 6-minute track. Now that is not an easy thing to pull off. I think the only concerns I have are production-based ones. I think that, and those are very minor, and I can almost excuse them for the sake of it being the kind of aesthetic that they might have been going through orally. But if we look at the individual components, or rather the structure of the song itself, we'll do that first. We either had verses, or we had choruses, or we had instrumental parts. There were little breaks where we reiterated on themes there. We had double choruses, and we had a fade out at the end. We had enough there. We had a solo section as well. We had enough there to keep the listener entertained. And if they were into this kind of music, it's par for the course. It's definitely recognizable style-wise and stylistically. I think that will mean that if you're already into this kind of music, you'll be able to sit there for 6 minutes and enjoy it. I think it's more of a niche thing. I don't think that if people are not sort of super intimate fans of this type of music, that they'll necessarily gel with it immediately, because there's just a lot of different factors within this track, such as how the instruments are being played, the style of vocal performance, the story that's being told, the way it sounds with regards to the production. The combination of those four things alone could be kind of off-putting to new listeners who are maybe not as familiar with the genre. But I think, for people that are, they'll be fine with it. So the structure made sense. There was no filler within the track, and that's it. And I think that's something to laud, because it can be very difficult to make a 6-minute track interesting to hear. And I think if there had been too much repetition, it would have wasted that. But I'm glad that we had that final chorus repeat at the end. I'm glad it didn't go over 6 minutes. We had the fade out at the end. It was classy. Well done. The guitar lines there. We had the chorusy, clean steals in the verse parts, and then we had the kind of fiery, almost disgusting sounding distortion in those hooks. And I think that the contrast tonally there was great. The arpeggios we had there never sounded totally majorish. It was either neutral or sad. We had some byproduct majors from how the guitars might have sounded with the vocals, for instance, how they harmonized. But beyond that, we simply kind of festered in that similar mood to what we had with the vocal performance and the lyrics. The bass guitars, or rather to continue with the guitars, for example, I think that when the distortion came in, double tracking is more of a thing that it's a post-production thing. I just want to say that I like the concept of the riff there, and I liked how the vocals segged into it, and there was a great sense of unison with the vocals in those hook parts, and everything kind of tied together. It was really great to hear. I enjoyed that part. It was an effective hook by virtue of that alone. The lead parts where we had almost not a chromaticism to it, but we kind of divorced ourselves from the key signature, or maybe we modulated within a chord within a similar key signature, but we didn't stick near the root. It wasn't a solo session, which was necessarily, it wasn't meant to satisfy the listener. I don't think we were playing that lead guitar to make people feel content or welcome. It was a little bit uncomfortable, but we didn't go for any harsh textures. It's just simply it kind of meandered a little bit. But I think again for the mood it's appropriate. There are all these little caveats, but I'm saying for the mood it's appropriate. I think it was well played and the personality is appropriate. The bass line with the fizz to that, the sizzle to that, the presence, it was ominous, it was full sounding, and it was appropriate and effective. And I think that even if we weren't going with the root notes, we would basically either position ourselves to be a nice foil for the guitars, or we just stick with the drums and kind of perform parallels there, and that was great. The bass line was suited the track excellently, and the rhythmic phrasing there was dope. The drums, with the slow tempo to it, how it kind of just kept moving along at that ambient it was wonderful. I loved the tone of the drums, but I also liked the fact that we stuck with those eighths. We didn't have too many crazy 16th or triplet parts going on there. It was more of a focus on the vocals, but when those kicks came in, or when we had the big hits for like the toms or whatever, they were powerful nonetheless. That's the beauty of pocketing with drums, is that when you do hit some stuff, people notice. And we smashed it there. And I know that seems like an obvious thing, but really, if you have too much of something all the time, you will, trust me, you'll zone out. And we didn't have that here for that reason. There was, again, minimalism in that respect, and it was effective. The overall combination of these elements within the mix, combined with the vocals and the story, created a situation where the motif was kind of surreal sounding. It was not... Everything fit together in a way that emoted and expressed itself. I think the ferocious tone to everything in the hook, how in your face and feral it sounded, suited the story well there to an extreme. It was very raw sounding. And I think that we chose notes in there, and we also made decisions with the post-production that suited that aesthetic. It made me, again, the way things were played made me feel claustrophobic, like I was kind of in my own head, kind of suffering. And that's what you want from a track like this. So I think, even if, again, it's not necessarily as comfortable to listeners who are less familiar with the style of music, I nonetheless feel that it was well written and it suited, it performed the function it needed to. I think that if you tried to do it either more on the nose or less on the nose, it wouldn't have been as effective. I think they found a great sort of equilibrium with the way they composed it, so well done. Finally, the studio recording, mixing and mastering. I think if I was going to say anything about the production of it, aside from the majority of it being very, very good, there's only a few things I want to sort of point out that could be things to work on in future. Because the composition was tight, happy with the vocals and all that. I needed a little bit more clarity with the vocals, even if it's, even if it's appropriate for style of music. There were just some words that didn't come through clearly. I think part of that, again, is because we had the guitars, and we could have double-tracked the guitars. I don't want to say the thing where, you can't copy and paste one guitar track from one side to the other, the stereo field, because they'll notch in the center phase each other out, because I assume that people who can produce stuff for release can do that. And that's me being genuine and kind, by the way. I'm not being a dick about it, but it's like, you have to actually... This is only if this has occurred. If we have not recorded 2 takes of the guitars, if we have just tried to do it but we've copied and pasted and put the other rhythm track on the other side, you can't have cloned rhythm tracks. You've got to record each side of the rhythm guitars individually. If we wanted to have the guitars in the center, that's cool. More power to you. I think that it would have sounded better if you'd had the guitars on the side, or at least if you're going to have like one guitar in the center to into that, then have the guitars kind of like that. Have them kind of go out to the sides to allow, especially if you've got multiple vocal layers on top, even if they go out to the sides sometimes, it just needed more clarity for the vocals. And I think part of that would have come from the guitars being on the sides. And it was weird because like in the verses, they sounded better. I think the guitars in the verses sounded better than the distortion. So I'm assuming it was a stylistic decision there, but that's just my thoughts on that. The drums, guitars, and bass and vocals in general were definitely not stereolized in the mix. They were recorded raw. There was very little effects chain processing on them. There might have been some reverb or something like that added to the vocals to make them a bit more misty, but I don't necessarily know if that benefited it. Sure, stylistically it might have been more appropriate, but as a listener wanting to hear the story, I don't know if it benefited me not being able to hear the lyrics properly, and I kind of want to be able to get as much as I can on the first listen, if that makes sense, especially if I'm actively listening to it. But like if we're into that, then more power to you. It's just, yeah, I think that the leveling was okay. I'm just not sure if that vocals were necessarily a placement thing in the stereo field, or there could have been some resonant frequencies. I think I mentioned as well that the radio filtered vocals in like that 2 to 3 minute mark that I pointed out after the second chorus, they needed to be notch EQ'd because there were some sharp upper register frequencies in there. But with all due respect, those are things we can learn as we continue. And depending on the headphones you're wearing or like the system setup you have, like it can be difficult to hear those things unless you're looking across multiple monitor systems. So despite all that though, things were nice and wide in the stereo field. I like the way the drums were placed and notched there. I think that the bass was nice in the low end and the guitars in the mid, spicy sounds, but they meshed together for the style aesthetic. There was dynamic range. Things just kind of came to a quiet bit occasionally. Things just stopped. Nice to have moments of pause to kind of think and ponder over stuff. But it was still nice and loud without pumping. So, that means the limiting and bus compressions handled well. And effectively, this is my review of this track from an act named Sodia, titled Man of Many Faces, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show us some love via their various social medias and their Spotify page. And stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they either help more than ever thought of crazy stuff going on in the world, and I'll catch you in the next review. Spiderhands Out.